welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor, and today we're doing some fall/spooky season book recommendations. But before we hop in the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you love all things books. We have this young adult thriller, Ace of Spades by Frida Abike Ayamide. I do believe that's how you say her last name, but feel free to correct me in the comments down below. So I'm going to be pretty light on the details for this one just because with young adult thrillers or just thrillers and mysteries in general, I think it's important to kind of hold back information to not spoil the thrilling aspect for this, but do check trigger warnings for this one if that is applicable to you because there are some heavy topics discussed in this book. So essentially, plot-wise, you're following Devin and Chiamaka, who are the only two black kids at this all-white, very expensive, well-to-do, prep, academy/school. Chiamaka is there because her family has money and she, got into that way. And then Devin is there on a scholarship. And then while they're there in their senior year, things start to go right. And they meet the infamous Ace of Spades. And, I'll let you figure it out from there. We do have two clear main characters if you're looking for that one. This book got a 4.75 for me. I know it's not a 5-star. And that honestly could be just because my cousin, when she just describing how to expect the ending for me, she kind of set up this really very high, crazy expectation. I don't know that quite hit for me as it did. Granted, most mystery thrillers rarely ever thoroughly shock me at the end, but it was kind of a shocking ending, so do keep that in mind. Plus, the ending kind of felt like it wrapped up real quickly. But yeah, I'm curious to see what else from this author, she has out. I think she has a new thriller out that I'm excited to read. Then we have His Hideous Heart by various authors, but edited by Dahlia Adler. So if you are an Edgar Allan Poe fan like I am, this is, I believe it is, 13 of Edgar Allan Poe's poems, famous poems and short stories, reimagined as, modern, queer, and BIPOC retellings. This one is a very interesting read because basically you see this thickness here. Half of that book is just the original context in the back and the other half is the actual retelling. So you have a 2-for-1 special here. So if you're like, I want to read some Edgar Allan Poe this season, you can pick it up and read the back. If you're like, I've already read the Edgar Allan Poe, I want to see what's coming in the end, this one's for you. I really enjoyed all of these. My favorite one was the Annabelle Lee retelling, which, let me check to see for sure. That is Night Tide by Tessa Gratton. I think that's how you say your name. That's my favorite one. Also, I discovered for the first time Edgar Allan Poe's Mysteries, and which I hadn't really read his mystery before, but I really enjoyed it. So this one is really fun, if you're looking for those gothic, spooky vibes, and you've got a lot of pick and choose your fun reads for the spooky season. Then we have another short story collection called Vampires Never Get Old. This is by various authors, but it's edited by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker. And the author of my favorite short story in His Hideous Heart, Tessa Gratton, also has a story in here. So this is a collection of short stories all focused around taking the popular vampire myths and giving it a popular modern spin with featuring queer and BIPOC characters. If you watch the show First Kill, the short story that inspired that is the last short story in here by V.E. Schwab. Now in terms of favorites, honestly, all of them were pretty darn good. Let me go through and check to see titles for me. Honestly, First Kill, obviously, true. I don't know, what else is there? There was one here and I can't remember what it's called. I think it was The House of Black Sapphires. I feel like that's the one that I'm most excited for. And then The Boys from Blood River and then Senior Year Sucks. All of them were pretty much good in this one. I think this one is solid. It was a 4.75 star for me. I really enjoyed it. So I've got 2 short story collections here for you. So if you're really in the vampire mood, if you're reeling from your lack of interview with the vampire content because, oh my gosh, who watched the end of season 2? Pick this up because I think I'm actually going to be reading Interview with a Vampire this fall for a video that I have planned, but here's something to satisfy your vampire-loving hearts. Now this one is for my zombie lovers, Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. This story answers the question of what would happen if during the American Civil War, zombies rose from the ground. So now not only are you fighting the end of slavery and the breakdown of the Union, but you're also having to come together to fight zombies and what happens after that. So in this story, you're following Jane, who is an African-American woman who has been trained her whole life to become an attendant who is, you know, someone who helps white women fight off zombies. Obviously, they aren't fighting the zombies, you are the one fighting the zombies. And during her time, or her final year at the school that she's being trained at, one of her friends, you know, family members goes missing, and she tries to help him find that. And, you know, zombies running amok, things go awry, and lots of craziness ensues. We do have two queer main characters, however, the romance and the queer storylines are not a big plot in this, it's more of a subplot. But this book, the writing is so crisp and fast and interesting. I think you'll be highly entertained and hooked during this. Do check trigger warnings. Obviously, based on the time that it was written about, there's going to be a lot of discussion of racism and many things that go along with slavery during that time. It does take place in the 1880s, so post-restoration situation going on there. And I'm excited. I'm trying to find the second book in stores, and for some reason, I can't find it. I should have just bought it when I bought this one. But this was a major hit this year, and I highly recommend. So now we're moving into all of the adult books. So these books, for the most part, will probably feature more gory or more spicy content. So, you know, pick and choose as necessary, but So first up, we have One Dark Window, or The Shepherd King's Duet by Rachel Gillick. I did read this earlier this year, and Book Talk's been talking about this for over a year right now. But I mean, this is basically a 5-star, 4.75-star duet for me. It was so interesting because in the first book you're following one main character, and that is Elspeth Spindle, who essentially lives in this world where the entire magic system for the most part is controlled by this deck of 12 different cards, and the only way that magic can be used is if the owner of the card has it on them and they tap it, and they are given and granted these powers. However, some people get infected by this darkness that gives them powers but ultimately deteriorates their mental state or physical state over time, and Elspeth is one of those. And she has managed to hide the fact that she has this illness for many years, you know, to avoid being captured and killed by the guard, until one day she is caught and found out by the head destrier, and that is Raven. And they set off on this plot to, you know, unravel the mysteries of this world and to set things right, and a little romance ensues. I will say in book 2 we start adding in 2 new POVs, so what we discussed in book 1 it takes an interesting turn in book 2, but I really enjoyed it. This is a gothic fantasy, so it has those very moody, spooky vibes, but it also has a heavy layer of romance to keep the romantasy readers intrigued, and I really enjoyed this one. So if you're looking for a nice little romantasy duet, this one should be a good little set that you could finish easily. Then we have My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine, or Jenna Levine, I'm not quite sure. This is the only true, like, romance that I have on here, although it does have that spooky twist with the vampire. So essentially you're following Cassie, who is down on her luck, and she is in search of some living quarters, an apartment in Chicago that's, you know, available for her to afford on her starving artist salary / part-time librarian job. She finds an apartment or room posted for an absurdly cheap price by this guy named Frederick, and she's like, well, I gotta take up his offer. And when she moves in there, she discovers this man is a vampire, and he needs her to help her acclimate to modern society because he's been asleep for about a century. And, you know, romance ensues from there. Some people will say this is a little cringy. To each their own. However, I thought it was cutesy. I thought it was fun. It's a little spicy. It's a little sweet. And it's just a nice little cozy little fantasy romance for y'all to, you know, sink your teeth into for the fall. So every book that I'm going to mention from here on out is going to be one that I read digitally, so you'll see the picture on the screen. So first up is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and this is a retelling of Dracula's brides from the point of his first bride, Constanta, and it's kind of told through a letter/diary format, and she's recounting her being discovered and turned by him, and essentially their life growing up from when she, first fell in love with him to her falling out of love with him and him gaining his new brides and so forth. This is a polyamorous queer representation here. This is like a very dark, moody situation going on. The version I did read had a little novella in the back from the point of one of the other brides, husband's situation. So there was that. That was fun. This is a very interesting read. I definitely think it's for modern sapphic queer literature, I think this is a must-have. I also think it kind of would be a really cool book to see adapted to a limited series, kind of like Interview with the Vampire, because I feel like it really feeds that vibe. So if you're looking for adult vampire, dark, moody vibes, this one's for you. It's also got that historical element to it. So up next is my most recent read, which I pulled from my September TBR, and that is Assistant to the villain. Now, by its name, this book essentially follows Evie, who by some luck or misfortune stumbles upon a job as the assistant to the kingdom's villain. And while she is working with him, shenanigans, romance, and things ensue from there, and things start going awry. I will say this is a romantasy, like cozy romantasy. However, it is a slow burn romance. You do get like the romantic vibes and feelings. However, it definitely isn't picked up quite as it's not like going full force, full throttle in book 1. I'm curious to see how it goes in book 2. But as with all like cozy fantasy romantic situations, this book does have a lot of moments that's more vibes than plot. But I didn't really mind it because it had a lot of funny, like a lot of levity, a lot of comedy in this that I really found interesting. And this girly, the author, she loves her Easter eggs, and I was like, oh, you caught me. I kind of figured out the mystery element to it by the end of the book, but she did have me pulling along. She did have me, bamboozled and tricked for the rest of it. The red herrings did catch me. So I'm definitely excited to see what book 2 brings, and I highly recommend this one. If it's still on Kindle Limited, you should theoretically be able to get it for free through there. If not, I do recommend the book. Then we have a series that I think everyone and the mothers have read at this point, but I'm going to put it on here because I finished it this year, and that is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This series, obviously, trigger warnings for this one. This is very gory, very bloody, very graphic, and it does have spice in it, so do check your trigger warnings for this one. But this is a series of 5 novellas that follows, I can't remember her name, but essentially it follows this woman who is on a revenge spree to take down and kill the men who wronged her and her family in her past. And while she's on this serial killing spree, she starts to form a romance with the FBI agent who is tasked with finding her and taking her in. And you follow that for the 5 books. And, a lot of things ensue throughout that. There's a little, 2 queer side characters that I also found very interesting, a little buy for buy on the side, although that really comes into fruition later down the line. And it was just, it's a fun, quick time. If you were someone who just really likes that gory aspect, that really good for her situation, highly recommend. I feel like if you like Butcher and Blackbird, you will like this one. I like this one more than Butcher and Blackbird. The last book I'm going to be talking about in this video is for all of my witchy romance lovers. I am a girly who loves a good witchy story, and I'm getting back into my Olivia Blake grind, so we're going to talk about One for My Enemy. So this is adult, fantasy, urban fantasy retelling of Romeo and Juliet meets the Baba Yaga story. So essentially what's happening is you're following these 2 witchy families in the boroughs of New York, the Fedorovs and the Antonovas. And essentially you have 3 different generations or 3 different love stories that have kind of been clashing and overlapping, and a lot of forbidden love stories going along. And while things are going on, while things are going along, essentially someone's been messing with the Antonovas, drug operation going on, and then so we send one of the Antonovas over, accuses the Fedorovs, and then things go from there. I think this is one where you need to go in with very little understanding. Just know that there's forbidden love involved, a lot of Romeo and Juliet tragedy situations, and also I have to say this, why did I know Romeo and Juliet was a tragedy and yet the ending of Act 2 still had me? Also, as always with Olivia Blake's writing, I always say it's a little more dense, a little more thick to get through. So it's probably not going to be a super quick read. You're probably going to have to be really mulling over what is said and done. But I do recommend if you're looking for that witchy, fantasy, urban vibe. So those are all the books that I'm going to be recommending for fall today. Do leave your fall, spooky season recommendations in the comments down below. Which one are you most excited to read, and what would you like me to be reading or talking about next?